Recruiters calling or texting you nonstop? Want to find the right job without exposing your personal info? Need tools to manage your search all for free? In every industry, there comes a moment when innovation challenges the status quo, ushering in a new era of possibilities. Beginly gets it. They get us. Their platform anonymously matches you with jobs that suit you until you decide to share your info. Customize your job search based on economic factors like salary or cost of living, or non-economic factors like location or nearby stadiums or airports. And their algorithm does the rest, all for free. Ready to find your perfect job? Visit beginlyhealth.com/doctoring. Powered by preference, connected by passion. You finish your residency training and fellowship, you're a young, vibrant attending, then you hit mid-career and everything just hurts. Everything hurts. So if everything hurts, what exercises should we be doing and which should we be avoiding? This is about exercising for the mid-career physician. Stay tuned. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Welcome back to the podcast. On today's episode, we have an old friend of the show, one of my original guests, Dr. Nancy Yen Shipley, aka NancyMD. That's where you can find her on all her handles. She's a board-certified sports fellowship-trained orthopedic surgeon in private practice in Portland, Oregon. She's the producer and host of the 6% with the NancyMD podcast, sharing the inspiring stories of women thriving in traditionally male-dominated fields, like orthopedic surgery. As a champion for DEI, she co-founded the Speak Up Ortho platform, encouraging awareness and action in the medical field and beyond. And her work in surgery, podcasting, and DEI has led to a busy role as a professional speaker, showing her passion for helping others open doors to be more, to be more, and to do more in their lives. And today we're going to be talking about exercise for the aging physician. So that aging physician is me. So we're going to be talking about all of the orthopedic issues that I'm having and how I and you and your patients can exercise in a less injury-prone way. Because there's a lot of advice out there and it's a lot of noise. So we're going to sift through that noise. So Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be back and be one of your repeat guests.
Yes. So first, I want to take into account that not everyone is able-bodied. Everyone has different abilities, and some may need to take modifications based on their own abilities. So I just want to leave that out there. So first, let's talk about how do you, as a sports medicine orthopedic surgeon, define physical fitness?
You know, physical fitness can really be defined pretty broadly. In generic and broad strokes, we might call it a state of health and well-being, which means a lot of different things to different people. You think about someone who's 18 and maybe has soccer practice and plays soccer, and that person, we're going to say, hey, that teen is pretty physically fit because they can not only do their sport, but they can also go through their everyday activities without undue fatigue or pain. That definition, you know, in some ways is same but different for someone in a different phase of life. You look at someone who's 88, right? They're not out there playing soccer. Most of them are not out there playing soccer. They may be doing different things to keep themselves fit. But I think defining whether that 88-year-old person is physically fit will depend on how they're faring in their day-to-day activities, right? Is this person out running errands? Are they still taking walks or even jogs around the block? Are they able to put their dishes away without having pain? You know, I think if they're being able to do their day-to-day activities and walk up a flight of stairs without fatigue, then that would be a sign that they have good strength, they have good cardiovascular endurance, they have good flexibility and body composition. You know, I think it may mean different things at different ages, but basically, if you can do your daily activities without fatigue, without pain, then that is one level of physical fitness. And of course, you know, when we're talking about... is getting up in the morning a daily activity? Right? It's like when I get up in the morning, I have pain. Like part of being in your 40s. As long as I think that, you know, that means you're alive. that you're getting up in the morning.
Good. Good
Right.
sign.
But
Yep.
it's a good
I
sign.
haven't
But
gotten up this morning. Yeah.
yeah. But, yeah, I mean, I think I just crossed over the threshold into 50. So, I still automatically say, oh, I'm in my 40s. And I realize that I'm actually not. I'm 50. But same thing, I think this podcast is basically selfishly for you and I to talk about how we can make ourselves feel better in our day-to-day lives. I think if you're waking up in pain, you're having trouble getting out of bed, you're stiff, you take that first step and your plantar fascia is hurting you, and
No.
right, and your back is tight, then, well, maybe there could be some improvement in physical fitness.
I love the way you put it. Like, think about your activities of daily living. And if you're having trouble with any of those, then that's the first thing to focus on. I think there's like an
Hmm.
Instagram ad or something that showed like, a little girl going to her grandfather for Christmas and he picks her up. And in the
Hmm.
previous weeks and months, he was doing exercises that mimicked that activity
I
because he
saw
really
that one.
wanted her to run to him and him be able to pick her up. Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting a little misty thinking about it, right? So, like, what are those things that are important to you? Actually, one of the things that's important to me is we have a pool in our backyard, right? We're privileged to have a pool, and throwing my kids. Now they're getting bigger and heavier, but being able to really chuck them is important
Yeah.
to me. So maybe I should be doing some exercises that are a little more focused. I think it
Right.
helps us to have these like goals. And yes, I should be stretching so I don't have so much pain in the morning. But like thinking about, well, what do I do during the day? What's important to me? And then centering your fitness goals around that rather than something more arbitrary. I think that's a
Right.
great way to think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to start, especially for the middle-aged and aging individual, because those are the basics of what do you actually need? How fit do you need to be able to just get through your day, right? And then the next notch beyond that, the next step up from that are recreational activities or sports that we like to do on the weekend. Like I'm a snowboarder. As I've gotten older, I've realized that I can't just throw my board in the back of the car and go up to the mountain and not warm up and not stretch. And also, not condition in the off season or leading up to the season. Like I used to be able to when I was 18 and hitting the snowboard park all day long. I'd just get up there and I'd fall down, get a little whiplash, I'd get over it and just carry on. But that's not my existence anymore. And for anyone who is kind of in knocking on middle-age door or squarely in middle age, we can't approach our hobbies and our athletic pursuits in the same way that we used to decades ago.
I found myself in a bit of an athletic paradox in that, like, I've worked out my whole life, since I was a teenager. And recently I've gotten some injuries. And so I've stopped doing one thing and started doing something else. And every time I changed what I was doing, I would get another injury. So from doing overhead presses, I started getting radiculopathy. And eventually that went away. It started off actually oddly with numbness first. And then I had pain. And then the pain went away. The numbness went away. And then I re-injured it and the numbness came back. But now it's going away. But in the interim, I was doing other things. So I started, like, instead of lifting weights, I started running, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got plantar fasciitis. So then I went back to weightlifting and I did body weight stuff. And so then I ended up getting bursitis from doing pistol squats or trying to do pistol squats. And then I got carpal tunnel from doing push-ups. Like, what the hell? And then I talked to one of my friends who's a hand surgeon and he was like, no, you should just stick to running. Runners, they never get injuries. And then one of my friends who runs, he was like, yeah, right, clearly. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm getting a hip replacement or a knee replacement, right? And he's in his late 40s. So, like, what are we supposed to do?
Well, I think that it sounds like you were cycling through different activities and sports rather than sprinkling a little bit of each of those all at once, right? Because maybe the cross training is a significant piece, but we also can't underscore so everything started with the weightlifting, right? We can't underscore the importance, even for seasoned exercisers like you and me, of just having a recheck on form, because if you're escalating in your weights, like doing overhead press and, maybe you're going a little bit too fast with the weights, maybe there's something off with form. We can't underscore the importance of having some coaching and having some form checks there. So I think that is one thing, but also, just looking at the variety of the exercises that we do, it's really common for all of us, we're all human, to just say, oh my gosh, I am so into this and this is what I'm going to do all the time. And it takes a little bit of mental effort and discipline to actually say, you know what, instead of running today, I am going to do some biking, or today's a flexibility day, or today's a core day. I think when you think about form, when you think about cross training, all of these things can help with preventing these overuse injuries.
Got it. So if you're training for a triathlon, then you stick to those three things because you're training for something specific, right? But like we're training for life. And so we should not be doing something specific because life isn't like that. So we should be doing our best to mix it up. That's some great advice because I tend to go all in on something, all in on podcasting, all in. And so that's just my personality, but I need to fight against that in order to prevent myself from getting injured like that. Okay.
I think a good way to reframe that is to go all in on variety and all in on balance, right? And if you think about it that way, then you're like, oh, I'm not going hard enough.
Being balanced isn't going to make it look good when I have to point my way to the gym,
To the gun show, right?
Okay. So are there any high risk exercises that you think, and this advice isn't just for us, it's for our patients, although disclaimer, not medical advice. This is for entertainment value only, but high risk exercises that we should be avoiding. I had a sports medicine physician tell me that overhead presses are too dangerous. That's why you messed up your neck and you shouldn't be doing them anymore. Anymore? I shouldn't be pushing something over my head anymore. Really?
So I'm a sports medicine doctor, but as a result, I end up seeing a lot of folks for shoulder issues. I always have certain shoulder exercises that I will tell my patients, and they're coming in, they already have some bursitis in their shoulder, or they have some rotator cuff tendonitis, and they like to work out, and they say, well, what shouldn't I be doing? So I tell them, you should not be doing overhead presses. Stop doing the overhead presses. Right? Because you can get strain, you can create injuries, you can irritate your nerves, right? So you probably had a little bit of radiculopathy or, whatever occurred during that time. Yes, we do overhead work in our day-to-day lives, but it's usually, I don't know, most physicians are not usually lifting that amount of weight overhead on a regular basis. And so I think that isolating different muscle groups and not doing it in the form of an overhead press is the better way. I will, it's kind of staying along the shoulder theme, right? I will also caution folks with lateral raises that go above shoulder level, thinking about the angle that you're holding your upper arm in with bench presses or even rows can really aggravate the shoulder. So they're specific to the shoulder. There are certain exercises
keeping
where
your elbows closer to your body. Is that what you
mean? A little
mean?
bit closer to your body,
closer to your body, not flared out like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So with bench presses, some people really like to be up here, but really if you just lower your elbows a little bit and your hands are kind of more over your chest, then you're going to get that chest workout, and same with flies. Flies don't need to be all the way up here. They can be dropped a little bit and you'll still get those muscles and still work out those muscles and not aggravate your shoulder quite as much. I also hate dips. Dips are the worst. You're pretty much putting all of your body weight here.
I've got gymnastics rings hanging outside and inside my house.
There are going to be people that do them just fine, right? But I see a lot of shoulder patients and they're like, oh, I got to work out more so I strengthen my shoulder. But really, I hate dips, not just personally, but I hate them for my patients because you're jamming your rotator cuff right there into the bottom of your acromion. And I think it's terrible. They'll say, well, what do? I got to get my triceps strong. And so there are things like skull crushers. There are, you can do cables and, do pull downs. And so there are other things where you can isolate those muscles without potentially harming your cuff or irritating the bursa. And that's sort of hyper focused on the shoulder because a lot of my practice is shoulder. But just generally speaking, I think, that's where the form piece comes in. You got to have balance between cardio and strength and flexibility. People often ask me, and you mentioned this earlier, people often ask me, can I keep running? Is running going to lead to arthritis? I would bet that your friend probably didn't entirely get their arthritic condition from just being a runner. There's a lot of evidence that running alone does not contribute to arthritis. It's multifactorial, right? So there's going to be environmental issues, metabolic issues, genetics is a big one. BMI is another, so, and oftentimes it's not just one single thing. All of these things contribute, because otherwise, why would the next guy or gal be able to run just as much as your friend and never have a hip replacement, right?
Well, because he's a snowboarder too.
Maybe he had a post-traumatic injury and that's why he's arthritic. Who knows? So.
Are you going to take pull-ups from me too? I do a lot of pull-ups. Are you going to take that? You've already taken overhead presses and dips away from me. Are you going to take pull-ups away too?
I'm not going to take pull-ups. I usually tell my patients that if you're pulling down and pulling towards you, that generally is good. If you have good form and you don't escalate too much too soon, then that's something that could potentially be sustainable.
Okay, but my goal of being able to do a muscle up, I should abandon that, it sounds like, because basically you're doing a pull-up into a dip. And
that sounds like a terrible idea.
Okay.
For me and you.
Yeah.
Maybe 25 years ago would have been a different story.
Okay. Leading a medical practice is challenging. There can be reimbursement changes, referral slowdowns, staff turnover, or drama. There are obstacles in the way of achieving your goals, or maybe it feels like you've hit a plateau. Who can you turn to for help with the business of managing a medical practice? The Physician Growth Accelerator, a private practice partner that helps you uncover and overcome constraints in your practice. They will check your business vitals, identify the root cause of what's restricting your growth, prescribe what to do about it, and help you achieve it, just like we do with our patients. Imagine your practice, where stress is reduced, profits increase, and both patients and staff, and you are happier. They've been making that vision a reality for over a decade. Isn't it time your practice thrived? Discover how at physiciangrowthaccelerator.com. Okay, so anything else? So you've taken a couple big things away from me. Anything else that we should be avoiding, like squats and deadlifts, or like the Olympic lifts, right? Like those are all overhead, right? The snatch, the clean, and the jerk, right? Cleans? Can I do cleans where you're like pulling it up, or too traumatic too?
I think it really just depends on whether or not you have worked your way up to that, right?
Yeah.
And, as you know, in medicine, we never speak in absolutes, right? We never truly say never. There are always going to be exceptions. And I think, if somebody has a lifelong experience with Olympic style lifting and they have proper form and they know when to add and when to back off, and they're not just overdoing it with, frequency of training, then potentially one could achieve that. But, with these really heavy weight and kind of doing the snatch or like lifting overhead with, really, really heavy things, there is going to be a risk of injury. So it's not, don't do it, but make sure you're doing it right and working your way up, potentially with guidance, right?
Yeah. Banging around heavy weights like I'm 25 is not the way to do it anymore. Okay. But again, is there anything, because you said like, this exercise, dips really, I don't like the angle that it puts your shoulder in, and overhead presses has all these risks to it. Is there anything else that you really are going to say, guys, this exercise, heed caution when you're doing it?
I think anytime you're lifting with heavy weights, heed caution, right? Just like for the reasons that we were talking about. And, and when it comes to running or high impact cardio, it's not don't do it. It's work your way up and do it the right way. And also for running in particular, you got to make sure your footwear is good. Make sure you're not running on old shoes. Make sure you are running on surfaces that maybe are a little bit more forgiving. And paying attention to those things can be helpful. And obviously conditioning your way up and having a variety of different exercises as well. And we also have to look at plyometrics and just make sure that, they're not overly tough on joints before the individual has conditioned and strengthened their way to be able to handle that high impact. And I'm not saying don't lift heavy, right? Because there really is, especially for women who are middle-aged, there really is a lot of talk and a lot of evidence for changing the way that we're working out, and I'm square in that category where you can't just like go run 5 times a week and expect to be fit. And, or even like those Peloton classes where, behind the bike, they've got those little 2-pound weights and you're doing like 2 pounds and 3 pounds at a time. Like
my 4-year-old was playing with those today. So just to put everything into perspective.
Right. But I think there is evidence for lifting heavy, but lifting the right way, right? Because that's going to combat the progressive muscle loss that we're going to experience from this point forward, men and women both. Women because of the perimenopause and having that rapid drop in estrogen that can occur tend to sort of fall off a cliff and all of a sudden start to lose muscle mass pretty quickly, lose bone mass a lot more quickly, whereas for guys it tends to be a little bit more of a subtle drift, right, with the decrease in testosterone over time. Yeah, we definitely do have to think about how we can lift heavy for us individually and how to get there in the right way to avoid injury.
So it sounds like the concentration needs to be on balance, injury avoidance, and the fight against deterioration.
Yes, because we are all dying a little bit every day. That's a very morbid way to think about it. But no, we're all, every single day we are aging. And so it becomes suddenly very crucial once you get into middle age, how to think about slowing that process and tempering that process so that your later years are quality years. There's all that talk about it's not lifespan, it's health span. How do we enjoy the second half of our lives in a way that is good for quality of life and just general fulfillment?
Well, there was that Harvard study on longevity that says that the best predictor of health and longevity is the strength of your social connections. So screw all this exercising stuff. I'm just going to go hang out
party.
with my friends. Come on.
Go have a party. Yeah, no, I mean, that's you can't underscore that. You can't ignore the importance of that.
Yeah, misery loves company. So exercise with friends. Exercise with friends.
Yes.
How do we improve mobility? So I can't remember ever being able to touch my toes, right? My mobility has always been garbage. Clearly, that's only going to get worse with time. I need to continue being able to put on socks. And I get teased about what I look like putting on socks. So how do we improve mobility? Like, does stretching actually work?
Yeah, I think stretching is important, and our tendency is when, something is hard, like touching your toes, then, sometimes the tendency is to be like, well, I don't really want to do that or work that. Who needs to do that? I do it myself. I'm totally guilty of it. I think keeping a mobility program in your weekly workout is important, and even better, sprinkling it throughout every single day helps as well, because otherwise you're going to have to go without socks when you're older, and that'll suck when it's cold.
Yeah. Are there any high return on investment exercises? Are there any, and not just for us, but also for our patients, right? Like that we're recommending to our patients. You said running is, you've talked about the benefits of running, but are there any other like really high return on investment exercises?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of, you don't need a fancy gym. You really don't need all that much equipment. Like some fundamental exercises that I would say are really important are being able to do squats. That gives you good leg strength and core strength. Push-ups or even just planks are good for upper body strength, not to mention core strength. And, for somebody who doesn't normally crank out like 100 push-ups or even like 5 push-ups, I tell people to start with the wall and progress to the counter and then progress to a bench. There are definitely modifications that one can do if they're not a regular pusher-upper. And lunges are great for balance. Planks are really great, like I was mentioning before. You mentioned the study about social connections and being important for longevity, but there was this other study that looked at a very simple move as a predictor for longevity and risk for injuries. And that is, can you get off the ground with no hands? And I was really dismayed a couple of years ago. I think I sort of fell off my exercise routine for a little bit, and bad timing, because you should not do that in your 40s. And I was having trouble getting off the ground. And I was like, is this the end? Is this how it all ends? But, when I started picking back up and trying to do so in a pretty mindful fashion and not going too fast with escalating weights, the results show when you put in the time and you put in the work, and I can get off the ground again. But that's like a super simple measure as we get into the 40s, 50s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, of just how good your leg and your core strength is and how good your balance is. And so that is a good, super easy thing to maintain. And then you're doing the right things, right?
But just to be clear, it's a proxy.
Exercises.
It's a proxy for fitness. It's not like, well, if I can do this, I am going to live longer. I just want to, I know we're like a smart and educated audience, but I just want to be clear, like, oh, I'm going to focus on that one thing. No, that's just like a measure that they use to measure like how strong you were in a couple of different ways. Yeah,
exactly.
So any parting words for the audience, anything that we haven't spoken about that you think is important for exercise in the aging physician? And then, this all clearly translates also to advice for our patients as well.
Yeah. I think I would just recap on the importance of a balanced routine. I think for your audience, if it's mostly physicians, right, and the people in healthcare, we do all think of ourselves as people who are highly educated and disciplined, but sometimes that can lead to a trap in believing that we can kind of figure it all out by ourselves, right, and self-diagnose. I have been guilty of that as well. And, it's important to be okay with reaching out for help and reaching out for coaching. Not even help, like even the highest level athletes need coaches. And so we shouldn't replace coaching with just the fact that, we went to medical school, we studied this stuff, but I think coaching is still incredibly important. I obviously know the shoulder well, and I know my joints well as an orthopedic surgeon, as a sports medicine surgeon, but I've made the mistake of trying to self-diagnose and self-treat and run into trouble. And in terms of just kind of maintaining mobility, strength, flexibility, all of that, one of the biggest things and the biggest differences that I found was when I actually found a coach. So I now work with somebody virtually. It doesn't even have to be in person, but I have a strength and conditioning coach that I can work with and designs exercises for me. I know these exercises, but now I have somebody saying, you should probably back off on this and increase this. And when I run into trouble, I have somebody to bounce things off of, and they're like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, we shouldn't take for granted how much coaching, having somebody else as a partner to help us along in this quest for fitness in midlife and beyond. We can't overlook that.
So I need a career coach, a business coach, a fitness coach, a life coach, a money coach. Is there anything that I'm missing?
I think that covers a lot of it. Any therapist.
But balance. So we'll rotate each of them in and out. Actually, I think that's probably the best way to do it, right? You get like a tweak in this part of your life, and then you get a tweak in that part of your life, and then you kind of keep your cadre of coaches rotating.
And there you go.
There we go. Okay. Well, Nancy Yen Shipley, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
Being contacted by recruiters can be a lot. I've been at the same job for over 12 years, and I still get texts and emails, sometimes in the middle of the night. Instead, get matched anonymously to find your right job. Beginly Health is a dating app for your career. To swipe right on your career, visit beginlyhealth.com/doctoring. Powered by preference, connected by passion. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means you either fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Something. It would really help me out. And maybe what you learned from this episode can help someone else too. The views expressed in this episode are those of the interviewer and interviewee and don't represent the views of their employer or even their significant other, even though the magic of podcasting make it sound like I'm talking directly to you. This is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or really any advice. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.